modern handguns, there's three major trigger types. The first I'm going to talk about is the single action trigger. Single action, what it really refers to is the fact that when you touch the trigger, the one action, the action of the hammer, in this case dropping, is the only action taking place. If I was to pull the trigger with the hammer in the down position, nothing happens. There is no action there. The hammer has to be back, and the single action of when I pull the trigger, the hammer dropping, that is a single action. The old Western guns were all single action. In fact, because they were 6-shooters or revolvers, you'd have to pull back the hammer, fire, pull back the hammer, fire, pull back the hammer, fire. Now with the modern guns, like the 1911, even though it's not all that modern, you have to have the hammer back, and if you want to carry it safely, you must have the lock up so that the hammer doesn't fall by mistake. That when you do that single action trigger, the firearm would recoil, thus putting the trigger in single action again. So as I fire the gun, hammer goes down, the firearm recoils, and the hammer goes back again. So this is how it becomes a semi-automatic pistol, but it is still a single action. Bing, one action. A double action trigger, such as the SIG P226, there's basically more than one action taking place here. As I pull the trigger on this firearm, that is another action. That the hammer. So here's one action, and when the hammer falls, that is a second action. First action, second action. It's two actions there. The SIG is nice in that the double action is very safe. I'm not going to pull this by mistake, but when I do pull it, and for the most part that's true. The SIG is also nice because if I'm in action shooting and I decide I want to put my gun away, it has this is called a decocker, so that I can take that single action hammer and trigger and put it back to the double action. Very cool feature when this came out. I guess you gotta thank the Swiss for that. As modern day handguns have progressed, I wanted to run over the HK45, which has something called an Lem trigger. SIG, I think, has something similar. The Lem trigger is an option on some guns, and that is that it has really the trigger, the hammer moves back. So again, I have that same double action. The thing is, on the Lem trigger, the double action is extremely easy. Whereas on the SIG again, this takes some strength to move that double action. On the HK and the Lem trigger, which stands for Law Enforcement Modification, is that it's easy. See, the problem with the double action to single action is that you get this hard trigger pull, and as the gun recoils, you then go into this light trigger pull. Now people like the light trigger pull, they just don't like changing from a heavy to a light. Most people like the same trigger pull over and over again. For the Lem is really kind of taking care of that, because the first stage of the double action is easy. And when you get to the breaking point, it is also easy. The gun would then also recoil and put it back in that single action again. So it's almost like it's closer to having the same hammer design in general, especially on these double actions, gives you the ability to double strike a round in the chamber. What that basically means is if I'm in single action shooting, bang, 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 all of a sudden I fire and nothing happens. Modern protocol says you tap the gun, you rack the gun, and you shoot again. And that protocol will work for any firearm. On the double action, type thing. If I'm shooting bang, 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 and I shoot and nothing happens, I can quickly retry again in case the problem is a light primer strike, as in the firearm hit the primer of the round, but it did not set it off. It just needed to be hit harder. Some law enforcement like that quick ability to, if I'm shooting, bang, bang again, and then if that doesn't work, then I tap, rack, bang. Some people say that's stupid, you should just tap, rack, bang right away, and that's an argument to be had by other people, not me. You know, Glock is kind of the poster boy for striker action pistols, and probably with good reason. It is a really reliable pistol. A striker, there's no hammer here. There is, as opposed to in the hammer fired, the firing pin in here is struck by the hammer, which then strikes the back of a round, which then ignites the powder inside the round, which then pushes the bullet out, and the shell is popped out when this reciprocates. The firing pin that the hammer hits has a spring on it, so that the hammer is overcoming the force of the spring, and then the pin comes back to rest. And then when the hammer comes down again and hits the spring will again overcome the pressure of the spring, and the firing pin will come back to rest. In a striker fired, you have a little bit different system where the firing pin is actually sort of back and ready to go, with tension trying to let it go forward. On something like a Glock, the striker, as the trigger is pulled, the striker is somewhat pulled back. There is some tension on it, making it want to go forward and again hit that round. So my striker is under pressure, pulled back more than it wants to be. As I pull the trigger, the striker gets pulled back more until it is released. And when it is released, the pin flies forward and hits the back of the round again, going through the same process to fire a bullet. Some people really like this system. You don't have that double strike capability that you do with that double action, where after you pull the trigger, if the round doesn't go off, you immediately have to tap, rack, and try to shoot again. That's the only way to really, there's no double strike capability as there is with a hammer. Having said that, the striker has been very reliable, I think. It is extremely modern. The Glock trigger pull is not exactly what I would call light, and here's when we get into the difference of striker fired, which is the striker, which is really a firing pin, is under tension back, but as I pull the trigger, I'm pulling back that striker even more before it lets go to come forward. Another modern handgun, the Walther Ppq, has a little bit different system where the striker in this is already all the way back. As I pull the trigger, I'm not pulling back that striker anymore. All I'm doing is releasing it. So as I release it, it goes forward. In the Glock, I have to pull it back a little bit more before it goes forward. So the PPQ actually has a nicer trigger because of it. Most people say that this PPQ is the best polymer striker fired trigger ever. You know, production wise, that is, and I tend to agree with them. Of all these guns, I'm making this video real quick because I probably will be reducing my gun collection. Any comments on which guns you'd like a review on before they go out the door, and or which ones I should keep and get rid of, please let me know. Whenever I go to sell one, I end up not wanting to do it. But I guess you gotta part with good things sometimes. So let me know what you guys think about these pistols, anything you want to know more on, and any sort of reviews you want, let me know. Peace.